Hello Internet, I'm Jackie Fox, and I'd like to start with a brief apology. Apparently my series on sex work was too hot for my laptop to handle because it burned out my motherboard. It took about a month for the warranty repairs to be completed, but now I'm back with the new, used, repaired laptop that is perfectly suitable for me to make videos again. So I'm back. Also, back doing a relatively live video for the first time in a while. And hey, my drink's still on camera, so might as well. Yeah, you can't really. Cool. You can tell what flavor I like, but not what brand. Dope. So, in this set of videos, I'm going to be talking about a series that I watched while I was taking a little bit of a vacation from making YouTube videos, and that's Star Trek Enterprise. There are two particular episodes and two particular seasons that I want to discuss. So let's get this kicked off with episode 22 from season 2, Cogenitor. See, when I was a kid, I was a total Trekkie, but I never really found myself getting into Enterprise. The show aired just after 9/11, and I don't know, it didn't feel quite right to me. Maybe it was a little too flashy and new. Maybe the social messaging was kind of going over my head a bit. I remember not liking Deep Space Nine because of all the talk of prophets, and I could only really interpret that in a religious sense. And I was just waiting for this religious leader to show up and explain why they were robbing everybody, essentially, for what? So in this episode, the crew makes first contact with a ship that is orbiting a sun. And they find out that this new species has 3 particular sexes. At least this is how it's referred to in the very beginning. After that, they drop the reference to sex and start going with gender, which kind of conflates some things in a way that probably wasn't very problematic in 2001, 2002, when this 2002 when this show aired, but, well, let's just say the statement that on Earth we only have 2 genders is certainly false in the future, and is false even today, and was false when this show aired, as many cultures across Earth, both indigenous Americans and even Indians, both have a 3rd gender, and many other cultures do as well. So this is maybe strictly correct for a for like a traditional European Western type culture, that there is only 2 genders, but that's not even true in Western cultures today. Despite that, I really liked a lot of the messaging here. The crux of the show's dilemma is that the 3rd gender, the cogenitor, is really only used to probably secrete an enzyme that is necessary in the reproductive process for their species. And that's what they're used for. Yeah, you heard me right. They are not allowed to have any life outside of assisting in sexual reproduction. They are essentially sex slaves that have no rights within society. This obviously seems like it's a bit of a metaphor for sexism directly, but even racism in a lot of ways. In most episodes of this show, the person who is fighting for the rights of this person that we're introduced to as a cogenitor, who doesn't even have a name, they aren't even allowed that much agency to have a unique personal identifier. They choose Charles, by the way. And as the doctor says of Charles, there is no biological reason why they are inferior in any way to the other genders of their species. There's no reason that they should be put in this position. And as it turns out, they learn to read incredibly fast. Their whole species is very intelligent, but like this cogenitor that is given no rights and considered not to be able to do anything other than participating in sex is actually smarter than the human members of the crew, at least in terms of the speed at which Charles learns. But everyone is going against Commander Tucker, who is the only person who seems to be fighting for Charles in this episode. And everyone else tells him this is the way this culture does it. They all kind of strawman him into a position of he's trying to interfere with their sex lives, and that's not it. He's worried about the life that this Cogenitor has outside of their sex life. He's worried that sex life is all the life that this individual is allowed to have. And this seems like a rights issue, a very serious one, as he says, a human rights issue. And as his crewmates point out, the Cogenitor is not human. It was a little uncomfortable to see him being the only person who could see Charles's innate rights. There are many other times in the show where they'll run into kind of a slave trading race, and they will fight for or free at least a few of the slaves. In every case, because they disagree with the practice. And yet, when Charles asks for refuge aboard their ship, something that they have given many other people for many other reasons, sometimes they didn't even know the true reason when they allowed the refugees on board, and they have a strong case for why this person should be allowed refuge. But the commander denies it, turns them to their ship, and it is there that they commit suicide. And that is the point where the messaging for this episode just gets really bad, because the commander lets Tucker have it for introducing these ideas of rights and agency into Charles's head. The unspoken reality here seems to be that after realizing that they could have a life, a real full life, the idea of having to go back to living in a closet until you're needed for reproduction was just too much, and Charles killed himself. I see that as a failing of the captain here. He could have averted this by accepting their request for refuge aboard the ship. But he didn't. But instead, in this scene, he is very stubbornly against the actions that Tucker has taken, the actions that I admired most in the episode. And because he is the captain, he is kind of, in a way, an authority figure in this show. So when he explains what the moral of the episode should be, it comes from a place of authority. So it's harder to accept that he's wrong, because it feels like the show wants to say what's wrong in this case is right. And there's no reason that that should be the case. While this show in general is really good about looking at oppression critically and freeing those who are oppressed when possible, it really dropped the ball and just kind of flew warp speed into a sun with the message of this particular episode. But the next episode that we're going to talk about out of this season, I think nailed its messaging really well. So while I think that this one kind of messed up in the final yards, there is another episode that we're going to talk about next, which really got its messaging right in a way that was maybe 20 years too late for the franchise, but better late than never. So tune in next time. Fox out. Instead of doing my usual in-credit shtick, I want to spend a little bit of time giving a very special thank you to my newest of Glucose Guardians, this rad-ass penguin right here. Now, what is a Glucose Guardian? It is obviously a non-gendered term for sugar parent of any type. So, if you want to become one of my sugar parents and be one of the reasons that I can make even an hour's worth of a living wage per month on this channel, then feel free to check out the $20 tier on my Patreon. Or really any of the tiers, any amount of help helps, and I understand that maybe everybody doesn't have $20 to send a random person on YouTube. But here we are, you can do it, and if you got that extra money rattling around, I would really appreciate it, because this can often be a full-time job when I'm really getting at it. Speaking of full-time jobs, it looks like I'm going to have to retool my end credits
from scratch, so that will be coming, I guess, in the next video, but I really wanted to do this shout out here, so I guess it all works out. Until next time.